Trigger warning. NSFW content. Chapter 24. Your battle is my battle. Atsumu sleepily shuffles into onigiri, his feet dragging against the floor as he makes his way to the counter. His hair is a mess, and there's a heavy grogginess in his eyes that even the bright morning light streaming through the windows can't seem to chase away. He slept like a baby, as he always does when Kayumi is lying next to him, but the sleep was definitely too short, and perhaps the last whiskey last night was a bit too much, because Atsumu's body is clearly making him pay for it today. But it's whatever. He's fine, he thinks. He can ignore the impending headache. Alright. Osamu is at the counter, methodically preparing a fresh batch of onigiris with precise and practiced movements. A large tray of freshly made rice balls sits nearby, and their delicious aroma fills the small shop, making Atsumu's stomach growl. Without a word, he slides, not so gracefully, onto a stool in front of the counter and grabs one onigiri. He takes a big bite and savors the taste with a satisfied moan. The rice is perfectly seasoned, soft and sticky in just the right way, while the filling, a burst of savory salmon and edamame, melts on his tongue. This shit is good. It's better than any breakfast he could hope for after a night like the one he's had, and honestly, he can't wait for everyone to burst into Osamu's shop to get a taste of whatever heaven his brother is creating and have the same experience as Atsumu. He knows people will go crazy for Osamu's food. At least, Atsumu does. Morning to you too, Osamu says dryly, not bothering to look up from his work. Atsumu just grunts in response, too tired and too focused on eating to engage in any proper conversation. Osamu glances at him, shaking his head slightly. Did you run into Rin on the way here? He was heading to the shower last I checked. Atsumu pauses mid-bite, his eyes narrowing slightly. So that was Rin in the bathroom and not Kayumi? He tries to recall the morning's blur of events, but his memory is still too foggy. Osamu raises an eyebrow at his twin's sudden stillness. Hello, you know Rin, right? Tall guy, weird hair, has a matching tattoo. Osamu frowns when his brother doesn't seem to move from his stupor. Stays here sometimes? Atsumu swallows the chewed food and nods slowly, more to himself than to Osamu. So, he's already gone then, he mumbles, half expecting Kayumi to appear from some shadowy corner of the shop, but Osamu nods. Focus shifted back on shaping onigiris. Yeah, he went to Sendai to meet Oikura. Before Atsumu can stop himself, he chokes on his next bite, spraying a mouthful of rice across the counter and directly onto Osamu's face. Osamu freezes. Then, he sighs and narrows his eyes, slowly wiping the rice from his face. Fucking hell, he mutters and then raises his voice. Damn it, Atsumu, don't waste my food. But Atsumu isn't listening. He's too busy processing what he just heard. Kayumi went where? He demands, voice rising with panic. Osamu wipes the counter with a scowl, still muttering about wasted food. To Oikura, you klutz. Wanted to settle a few things about the confrontation. Geez, you really? Oh, Atsumu says, his mind suddenly racing. He's certain that Kayumi is meeting Oikura to tell him he won't be joining the upcoming mission. Kayumi is probably warning him that they can't count on him. Right, that must be it. Why else would he go to Sendai? They were talking about this the night before. It only makes sense that Kayumi informs Oikura as soon as possible so that they can come up with a good strategy to take Ashijima down and deal with Tendo without him. Atsumu is already putting it all together in his head when a sudden, horrifying thought crashes through his logic. He turns to Osamu, his face pale, and asks in an almost shaky voice, wait, you've run into Kayumi? Osamu stares at Atsumu for a long moment, his mouth twisting into a half grimace as if he can't quite believe what his twin just asked. Yeah, he was here about an hour ago. Osamu gestures to the neatly placed onigiris. Helped me make these. Had breakfast. Washed up and left. Atsumu feels his heart sink into his stomach. He's pretty sure he's still half asleep because none of this makes any sense. Osamu and Kayumi, an hour together, alone. He stares at his brother, speechless for a moment because what the actual fuck? He's shitting him. Right, they had a full hour of talking. Without him. Is Kayumi still alive? Why is Osamu even still alive? What does he mean? Kayumi helped him making onigiris. And why does it sound like the two of them didn't end up butting heads? That doesn't even make any sense at all. Did Osamu in truth chop him up and use him as onigiri fillings? Horrified, Atsumu stares at what's left of his rice ball in his hands and twists his mouth. This is like introducing your partner to your parents. Except it's about 100 times worse because it's Osamu and there's no way he didn't mess with Kayumi. Atsumu glances up warily and catches the gleam of amusement in his brother's eyes. So, he was having his fun. You're really down bad, aren't ya? Osamu says with a slow, mocking drawl, and Atsumu's stomach plummets even further. I'm not. He snaps a little too quickly, squirming in his seat. Atsumu knows it's a lie, and judging by the smirk curling on Osamu's lips, his brother knows it too. You are, Osamu says, wiping the counter with casual ease, clearly enjoying every second of Atsumu's misery. I mean, look at ya, squirming like a worm on a hook. I'm not squirming, Atsumu protests, even though, yeah, he is, but Osamu doesn't need to point that out. Oh, you're squirming all right, Osamu says with a grin, leaning his elbows on the counter. I can't believe how whipped you are. Kyumi has you wrapped around his little finger, doesn't he? Kyumi. Atsumu groans and slumps down onto the counter with his arms crossed, burying his face in them. His ears burn with embarrassment, and when he finally dares to lift his head just a little, he ends up glaring up at his brother. Shut up, I'm not whipped. Osamu chuckles. That low, knowing sound that grates on Atsumu's nerves. Sure you are. Bet if Kyumi told you to jump off a bridge, you'd ask how high on the way down. I wouldn't. Atsumu starts but then hesitates, realizing the depth of his devotion. And it's true, he probably would. After all, he is willing to throw away his own life if it means that both Osamu and Kyumi can be happy and free. Atsumu groans into his arms, remembering that he actually hates his brother. Fuck off. Yeah, the worst. Osamu just shrugs, clearly unbothered. You asked. Yeah. Osamu is a prick. Atsumu squeezes his eyes shut, trying to will away the heat crawling up his neck, but it only gets worse. The silence between them stretches on, filled only by the faint sound of Osamu busying himself behind the counter. Atsumu hates how much his brother's opinion matters. How? For some stupid reason, it feels like whatever Osamu thinks of Kyumi will change something. His stomach churns, not from the food but from nerves, the kind that settle deep and stick around. It's almost ridiculous, but Osamu's approval feels heavier than he'd like to admit. His thoughts swell as he rests his head on his arms, pressing his forehead into the cool surface of the counter. He groans again, more to himself this time, because even though he's admitted it before, it still feels overwhelming. He is in love with Kyumi, deeply so, and no matter how much he tries to brace himself for it, the weight of that truth is almost too much to handle, especially since Atsumu knows it would kill him to ever see Kyumi so miserable again because of him, especially ever since Osamu knows what kind of influence Kyumi really has on Atsumu, and he knows that Osamu hates it. Atsumu knows that his brother can't stand to see him like this, so naive, so vulnerable, so devoted, because Atsumu can't stand to see Osamu like this either. Atsumu tries to gather himself, but his heart won't stop racing, and no matter how hard he presses his face into his arms, the warmth in his cheeks doesn't fade. It's like the longer he hides, the more his mind runs in circles, making the moment stretch even further. He knows he can't just sit here forever, though, so eventually, he takes a slow, steadying breath. He peeks out from his folded arms, staring up at his brother with narrowed eyes. Atsumu's face is still warm, the heat creeping up to his ears, and his heart pounds so hard he's sure Osamu can hear it from where he is standing. He chews on his lip for a moment, debating whether or not to ask, but the words slip out before he can stop himself, his voice muffled and uncertain. So, what do you think? The second the question leaves his mouth, Atsumu regrets it. His pulse quickens, and he can feel his stomach twist into knots again. It's not like he doesn't know Osamu would be honest with him. Brutally honest, in fact. But that doesn't make it any less terrifying. He wants his brother's approval, craves it in a way he never admits out loud. After all, this is about Kyumi, the man who means the world to him, and the thought of Osamu not liking him, it makes his chest tighten with unease, every breath feeling a little harder than the last. He stares at the countertop, not daring to look up at his brother while his fingers fidget with the sleeve of his jacket, waiting for what feels like forever for Osamu to speak. Then, Osamu finally breaks the silence. His voice seems calm, thoughtful in a way, soothing. You mean about Kyumi? Atsumu nods, feeling a little vulnerable under Osamu's sudden shift in tone. He doesn't know what he's expecting. Osamu is his twin, after all, and there's no one whose opinion matters more to him. Osamu dries his washed hands while he leans back, puts the towel aside once he's done and rubs his palm across the back of his neck as he considers it. Atsumu squirms again. Well, I think he's solid. Atsumu's brows furrow. Solid? Yeah. Osamu shrugs. Polite, skilled, handsome, I guess, he adds with a smirk, eyes glinting with mischief. Honestly can't believe you caught someone like that. Oh, screw you. Atsumu scowls immediately. I'm a fucking catch myself. You know. Osamu chuckles, clearly amused. Yeah, sure. I just thought a guy like Kyumi might be smarter. The teasing lilt in his voice is impossible to miss, and Atsumu groans, dramatically slumping over the counter again. Yeah, the worst, he mutters. Osamu shakes his head, still grinning. Nah, but I'm serious. He does seem a bit like an asshole, though to you, at least. Atsumu lifts his head just enough to meet Osamu's eyes, his expression flat. Oh, he totally is. Osamu laughs at that, and it's the kind of sound that warms the air between them. Figures. Yeah, probably no better. Bet you've been getting on his nerves since day one. Wouldn't be me if I didn't, would it? Atsumu smirks, not even bothering to deny it. This feels easy, natural. Atsumu can already feel some of the tension in his chest easing, but then Osamu's tone shifts slightly, growing more thoughtful. Atsumu takes a deep breath. Kyumi. Osamu pauses for a beat, then nods slowly. He's kinda like Ma. Atsumu blinks, glancing up at his brother, his breath hitching slightly at the unexpected comparison. Osamu doesn't look away, and Atsumu just nods. It's true. Kyumi does have that same meticulousness, that sharp attention to detail and order, and it doesn't take long for Atsumu to know what Osamu's hinting at. There's a flicker of worry in Osamu's eyes. You okay with that? The question hangs in the air, but Atsumu doesn't even have to think about it. He straightens up a bit, feeling the weight of his brother's concern, but he easily brushes it aside. Yeah, Atsumu says, his voice firmer than he expected. I never cared about that, not once, and he never will. It's It's a part of Kyumi that never bothered him to begin with, and by now it's a part that Atsumu has learned to love as well. Osamu studies him for a second longer, then nods, seemingly satisfied with his brother's answer. The tightness in Atsumu's chest starts to loosen, his anxiety slowly ebbing away as Osamu adjusts his position, crossing his arms over his chest. All right, he says, voice softer now. I think he's pretty okay. You know, seems like a good fit for you. Atsumu shifts uncomfortably, looking away as a strange mix of emotions begins to creep up inside him. He's grateful, relieved, even, but there is something in Osamu's words that hits him harder than he expected. Trust him. He is glad to get Osamu's approval, but something about hearing it makes his feelings for Kyumi even more real, more overwhelming, because Kyumi, well, Kyumi has never really said anything about how he truly feels. Sure, he's shown it, in all sorts of ways, and it's not like Atsumu even needs him to confess anything or say it out loud. He doesn't doubt Kyumi's feelings, and he knows they do have a deep connection. Really, Atsumu is aware that whatever Kyumi feels for him is something akin to love, and even if it wouldn't be, it's not like this is anything that Atsumu expects from him. He just wants Kyumi to be happy, and if Atsumu isn't the right person for that, well, he'd accept it. He just wants to do anything to keep Kyumi safe, to protect him, no matter what, as long as he's okay. That's all that matters. He mumbles under his breath, barely loud enough for Osamu to hear. He watches Atsumu closely for a moment, his gaze unreadable, and then, just when Atsumu thinks this conversation is over, Osamu says something that catches him completely off guard. Atsumu, he begins, but you know that Kyumi loves you, right? Atsumu freezes, his head snapping up to meet Osamu's eyes, wide with disbelief. Kyumi loves you. He's doing all of this shit to protect you. Because he loves you. What? Atsumu gulps. Because how could they possibly know? How can both Osamu and Suna just assume something they have no idea about? They know nothing about Kyumi. They don't know anything about how messed up his emotions are. So how? How do they have the confidence to claim that Kyumi's feelings for Atsumu are so obvious when not even Atsumu himself is sure what Kyumi really feels? It is kinda obvious. You know, Osamu doesn't waver, his expression calm, almost amused by Atsumu's reaction. It's as if he can read Atsumu's mind. But well, who is he kidding? Of course, Osamu is able to do that. He's Atsumu's twin after all. Anyone with half a brain can see how much that guy cares about you. A love that will never fade. Atsumu's heart dares to skip a beat. He opens his mouth to argue, to deny it, but no words come out. His mind races, trying to make sense of what Osamu just said, but all he can feel is the pounding of his heart in his chest, the way his pulse quickens at the thought. Osamu raises an eyebrow, his lips quirking into a small, knowing smile. Guess you're too dumb to notice. Huh? I just don't wanna get my hopes up. Atsumu mumbles, chewing on his lip. What? Osamu snickers, but there's no bite to it. Cause you think he's gonna dump you. Atsumu shrugs, even as his heart clenches painfully. What if? His thoughts trail off, unfinished, but the weight of them settles deep in his chest. If Kyumi ever left him, he knows what he'd do. He'd still protect him, still look out for him from a distance. Kyumi could do anything to him, but Atsumu would never let him get hurt. Never again. As long as Kyumi is safe, nothing else matters. Even if it meant Kyumi walking away. If that's what it takes for him to be happy, Atsumu would let him go, because nothing will ever change the feelings Atsumu has for this man. So yeah, he'd let him go. You once told me that Kyumi is to you what Rin is to me. Atsumu blinks, surprised by the shift in conversation. And you know, I think they're pretty similar in a way. Rin and Kyumi. I mean, he frowns, not sure where his brother is going with this. And if I've learned anything these past few months, Osamu continues, it's that it's okay to get your hopes up, even if it means you might get hurt. Rin would never hurt you. Atsumu mutters, brows furrowing. Yes, and I know Kyumi would never hurt you either. Atsumu stays silent, his frown deepening. He knows that, of course. He knows that Kyumi would never hurt him intentionally, but that's not what he's afraid of. Aren't you frustrated sometimes? Atsumu sighs, propping his elbows on the counter and resting his cheek against his fist, his fingers playing absently with his necklace. That he never had the guts to tell you how he feels? It's an indirect jab, not just at Kyumi but at Rin too. Atsumu knows about Osamu's confession almost 3 years ago now, and well, it didn't exactly go well. I think we're both scared, Osamu admits, leaning back, scared we might put each other in danger if we take things further. But you love Sunarin. Atsumu presses, and you wanna be with him, and you wanna tell him how you feel. Yeah, I guess. Osamu shrugs, but even more than that, I wanna keep him safe. Atsumu huffs in frustration. You two are strong, Samu, and you aren't alone. I'm here. I'll always protect both of you if anyone dares to hurt you. No one would be able to get in between you two. So why should it be different for you and Kyumi? Osamu's voice is calm, but his words hit hard. How are you two any different? Atsumu's breath hitches, his mind spiraling into all the things he hasn't said out loud. There is no one with whom he has shared these thoughts so far, even if they are painfully obvious. And he knows there is no reason to be scared, and yet voicing them leaves Atsumu's stomach tied in knots. It's just different. He mutters, running a hand through his hair as if that'll help ease the weight in his chest. Osamu raises a brow, waiting, but Atsumu can't even meet his eyes. It's different because Kyumi is in the palm of someone who has too much power. Ashijima. The name alone feels heavy, sitting like lead on his tongue. He's said it so many times before, but never quite like this. Osamu frowns. frowns. What about him? Atsumu bites the inside of his cheek. It's not. I mean, Kyumi doesn't love him or anything. That part is clear. Kyumi's never said it outright, but Atsumu knows in his gut that whatever bond Kyumi and Ashijima share, it's not love, it's twisted, dangerous. It's not something you can walk away from so easily. Osamu's frown deepens, and Atsumu continues, voice quieter now. I know what Ashijima's capable of, what he could do if. Atsumu trails off, unable to finish the sentence. He doesn't know for sure if Ashijima's ever threatened Kyumi over him, but he wouldn't put it past him. And just the thought of it, just imagining what Ashijima might do if he knew how deep Atsumu's feelings for Kyumi really ran, it makes his stomach churn. If he found out that they were seeing each other, Atsumu didn't know how that would affect Kyumi. When it comes down to it, Atsumu can't predict what Ashijima would do. Ashijima has too much power. Atsumu finally says, his throat tight. He's unpredictable. Samu, I don't even know if Kyumi would ever get hurt because of me, but I can't shake it. I can't stop thinking about it. He pauses, a bitter laugh escaping him. I tried to tell Kyumi to cut ties, but it's impossible for him. Osamu lets out a slow breath, and Atsumu can feel his brother's gaze on him, heavy with concern. I'm scared for him, Atsumu admits, his voice barely above a whisper. Kyumi has to go back to Ashijima eventually. He can't just walk away. Atsumu shakes his head, frustration bubbling up inside him. And what if Ashijima finds out about us? What then? What the hell would he do to Kyumi? Osamu is quiet for a moment, absorbing all of it. Then, he shifts, folding his arms across his chest. You think Ashijima would hurt him? Osamu asks softly. I don't know. Atsumu snaps, his frustration slipping through. That's the thing, Samu. I don't know. But what if he does? What if he uses Kyumi to get to me? What if he? Atsumu cuts himself off, chest heaving with the weight of his own panic. Osamu doesn't answer right away. Instead, he rounds the counter and sits down next to Atsumu, his voice low and steady when he speaks again. Kyumi can handle himself. Atsumu looks up, eyes wide, heart still racing. But what if he can't? Kyumi may be tough on the outside, but he's soft on the inside. He had every reason to kill Atsumu back then. Hell, he has every reason to kill Ashijima now. But look where they are. Osamu doesn't hesitate this time. He can, he says firmly, locking eyes with Atsumu, and he's already doing it. Atsumu blinks, unsure what his brother means, so Osamu elaborates. He went to Sendai. Atsumu frowns. Yeah, you mentioned that. To talk to Ikoa. Osamu watches his brother's reaction carefully, his tone cautious. He's looking out for you, Atsumu. Atsumu stares at his brother, his pulse thundering in his ears. What are you talking about? Osamu's expression is steady. Kyumi promised me you'd come out of this unscathed, alive, and I'm gonna hold him to his word. Wait. Atsumu interrupts, his heart pounding in his chest. What do you mean? Osamu's brow furrows. Kyumi went to Sendai to talk to Ikoa about the mission, to tell him he's gonna stay out of this, right? Atsumu's voice wavers, searching for reassurance, but Osamu shakes his head, his eyes locked with Atsumu's, and his next words shatter his fragile hope. No, to tell him how he's gonna join us. Atsumu's stomach drops, but he's not supposed to be part of this. His voice cracks, his panic creeping in. We agreed. He wasn't supposed to get involved. He just wants to. No. Atsumu stands abruptly, knocking his chair back as he steps away, hands flying up to his temples as if the pressure building in his head could burst any second. No. He's not supposed to be there. Samu, we're supposed to keep him out of this. His voice is frantic, like the air has been knocked from his lungs. His chest heaves with a sudden, sharp anxiety. This is bad. Fuck. This is really bad. Osamu follows him, staying calm, but he can't hide the concern etched into his features. He's doing it to keep you safe. Atsumu whips around, panic flashing in his eyes. What if something happens to him because of me? We're supposed to protect him, not drag him into this mess. Osamu's expression hardens, frustration bubbling up as his own fear takes over. And who is gonna protect you? He snaps, louder than he intended. The sharpness of Osamu's voice cuts through the room, and for a moment, Atsumu freezes, caught off guard. His mouth opens to retort, but nothing comes out. Osamu takes a step closer, fists clenched at his sides. You're always thinking about everyone else but yourself. Osamu's voice trembles with desperation. His knuckles turn white. You're worried about Kyumi, about me, about everyone except the one person who's always putting himself on the line, and that is you. Atsumu opens his mouth to argue, but Osamu presses on, stepping closer, his face tight with emotion. If something happens to you because you're too busy sacrificing yourself for Kyumi, what am I supposed to do? Huh? What's he supposed to do? Atsumu glares at his brother, his own fists clenched, his heart pounding as anger and worry mix into one chaotic swirl. His chest rises and falls in quick, shallow breaths, his voice quiet but defiant. I can handle it. Bullshit. Atsumu. Osamu cuts him off, his voice wavering between anger and fear. You always think you can handle it, but what about us? I can't. Twice you almost died on me, and neither time did I even have the fucking chance to be there and take care of you. Do you know how fucking awful that feels? His eyes glisten with unshed tears, anger cracking into something raw. And now you're risking your life again. Putting hundreds of kilometers between us. so that once again, I'll have no idea if you're still alive or not. Kyumi is my only chance to make sure you're gonna be alright and you wanna take that away from me. Fuck you. Tsumu, are you really that selfish? You act as if I'm helpless. Like I can size up my opponents and take them on. Atsumu's voice rises, sharp with defensiveness. Newsflash. Samu, I don't need a goddamn babysitter. I can protect myself perfectly fine. This isn't just about you, asshole. Osamu snaps back, his words sharp, slicing through Atsumu's defenses. Right, it's about you and it's about Kyumi. So don't stand there and tell me to drag him into this mess when it's his life I'm risking. You're not the only one worried about someone. Alright, what about him? What about Kyumi? You keep saying the only thing that matters is his safety. But fucking hell. Tsumu, he's trying to keep you safe too. There's a heavy silence between them, both of them breathing hard. Atsumu's heart races, but the weight of Osamu's words hits him like a punch to his gut. He's been trying to ignore this, brush it off as something he could control, but he can't. Atsumu looks away, jaw tight, but he's still not ready to give up. We're heading to Sendai. Osamu's face twists in disbelief. Tsumu, we're heading to Sendai now. Osamu looks like he wants to kill him. Atsumu pushes the door open to Ikoa's office with enough force to rattle the hinges, a storm already brewing in his eyes. Ikoa, Iwaizumi, and Kyumi are standing by the desk, seemingly deep in conversation, but the moment Atsumu barges in, all eyes snap to him. He's laser focused on Kyumi as he stomps forward, fire blazing through his every step. You don't get the right to do this. Atsumu snaps, voice cracking with a mixture of fury and desperation. Not this time. Kyumi straightens up, lips parting as if to respond, but Atsumu doesn't give him the chance. All this time, all this fucking time, you've been the one pulling the damn strings, taking the fall for me and Motoa. You were the one sacrificing yourself for everyone else. You were the one standing in the fucking line of fire. And for what? His voice wavers, but the anger keeps pouring out. So we could live in some bullshit peaceful life while you put yourself through hell. Kyumi's eyes narrow, tension settling in the air, but Atsumu is spiraling now, and there's no way anyone can stop him. I thought you were finally gonna break free of it. You gave me hope. You looked me in the eyes and made me believe you were done with this shit. That you'd back the hell off and let me take care of things for once. And just when I trusted that you'd stop throwing yourself on the fucking front lines, you do this. Atsumu's voice cracks as his words finally catch up with his fear. You slap me in the face. 'Cause that's what it feels like. Omi, you're throwing yourself back into the fire after everything. And what? Expect me to just sit back and watch? Fuck that. His chest heaves, and the whole room feels frozen in the aftermath of his outburst. Osamu and Rin step into the office behind him, clearly having followed him in his rage-fueled dash. Osamu rubs a hand over his face and sighs deeply. Sorry about him, he mutters toward Ikoa, then glances at Kyumi. I tried to make him see what your decision really meant, but, as usual, my brother would rather be a stubborn asshole about it than hear me out. Atsumu whips around to face Osamu, trying to bite back a sharp retort. I'm not being an, you're acting like one. Osamu cuts him off, crossing his arms. He made his choice. You act like this is all about you. You wanna start this again. Atsumu snaps, stepping closer to his twin. It's about him. He's throwing himself back into the fucking fire, Samu. And he's not the only one. Osamu shoots back, desperation rising in his own voice. You're so scared for him, but who's gonna protect you? You think this isn't ripping him apart, too? There's a tense, heavy pause. Atsumu glares at Osamu, eyes red and filled with equal parts rage and fear. The silence is thick until Ikoa, ever the instigator, scoffs and breaks it. Well, this is cute, he drawls, arms crossed as he leans back against his desk. But while you two have your little spat, there's still the whole what the hell are we doing about a Shijima and Tendo part of this conversation that needs addressing. Atsumu's gaze flickers to Ikoa, but he's still too caught up in his emotions to fully engage. Ikoa smirks. I mean, I get it. Great hero Kiyo-chan sacrificing himself and all that jazz. But maybe, just maybe, screaming in his face isn't the most productive solution? Iwaizumi shoots Ikoa a sharp look. Not helping. Toru, hey, I'm just saying, Ikoa says with a shrug. It's dramatic, sure, but we're in a bit of a jam, you know. So, Kyumi wanna chime in? Before the Mia twins start throwing punches, the room falls into an uneasy silence after Ikoa's comment. All eyes shifting to Kyumi. His expression is controlled, but there's a tightness to his jaw, a flicker in his eyes that betrays the storm beneath. He exhales slowly, trying to keep his voice measured. Atsumu, he starts, his tone clipped but calm. This isn't about trust, and it's not about abandoning you. You asked me to help, so I help. I did not. Atsumu lets out a bitter, desperate laugh, cutting Kyumi off. I did not ask you to help us. I asked you not to side with a Shijima when things get down to it. Yes, and that's what I'm doing. No, I made this decision because it's the best chance we have. I know a Shijima. I know what he's capable of, better than anyone else. Atsumu's fists shake at his sides, his pulse pounding in his ears. He's trying to stay calm. He really is. But the idea of Kyumi being anywhere near a Shijima or Tendo again makes his stomach churn. There's no winning in this. No safe route. No way to protect Kyumi like he wants to. Like he needs to. You don't get it. Atsumu breathes out. His voice low but trembling. His frustration and fear are bleeding through now. And he knows it. I do get it. Atsumu. I understand the risks. Do you? Atsumu's voice cracks. Desperation bleeding into every syllable. Because it doesn't fucking feel like it. It feels like you're walking right back into the same trap. Kyumi's eyes narrow, his patience thinning. Yes, I do. I know what a Shijima can do. I know what Tendo is capable of, and I know what I'm getting myself into better than anyone else in this room. You think you're the only one who's scared? The only one who's worried about what might happen? Trust me, you're not. Then why do you always act like it doesn't matter? Why are you so damn calm about it? This isn't just another mission, Omi. It's not some fucking game. One wrong move and Atsumu's voice breaks, emotion crashing over him like a tidal wave. And who's gonna protect you? Huh? Who's gonna keep you safe when you go up against people like them? I'm not some helpless victim. Atsumu, I've been handling situations like this my whole life. Yeah, and that's the problem. Atsumu yells, voice raw now, his chest heaving. You're always handling things on your own. Like I don't matter. Like this doesn't. Like we don't matter. The room falls into a thick silence after those words. Atsumu's chest rises and falls rapidly, and Kyumi stares at him, wide-eyed, the impact of Atsumu's outburst sinking in. The others in the room exchange uneasy glances but stay quiet, knowing this is something they can't intervene in. The words hang in the air, heavy and raw, and for a couple of seconds, Kyumi closes his eyes, furrows his brow and takes deep breaths. He tries to compose himself, but it seems that Atsumu is making it incredibly hard for him. When Onyx eyes capture molten gold, Atsumu feels the fire in them burning his skin, constricting his chest and tormenting his heart in ways no one else could. Kyumi's calm facade almost shatters, the sharp edge of his voice returning as he bites back. And this time there's a fury there that matches Atsumu's own. I don't want this any more than you do, but if I don't go, we lose everything. We lose the one chance we have to end this. You think I'm throwing myself into the fire, but I'm not the only one risking everything. Atsumu, you are too. Oikawa, Iwaizumi, Osamu, Suna. Everyone is risking something. Kyumi takes another deep breath. You act like I haven't thought about this 1,000 times. Like I'm not scared out of my fucking mind too. But I am. Atsumu, I really fucking am. Because one wrong move could separate them for good. Atsumu's breath catches in his throat. His fear is written all over his face. But beneath it lies something new. Some sort of understanding. Kyumi is still breathing deeply. The calm exterior he held onto now seemingly shattered. His voice softens, but the intensity remains. And as much as I will protect you, you will protect me. We'll do this side by side. You hear me? I want to be with you. But that's impossible if a Shijima is still a threat to us. I'm doing this because I don't want either of us to spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. But for that, we have to work together. A heavy silence blankets the room again. Atsumu is staring at him, breathing hard, and for a moment, it feels like everything has been thrown into the air, waiting to crash back down. He stares at Kyumi and Kyumi is staring at him. And it's stupid, isn't it? Standing here, fighting, letting fear and anxiety swallowing them whole. They are both assassins. Kyumi is leagues above Atsumu, and yet it feels like they are making a mistake by going into this together. I want to be with you, and Atsumu wants to be with him, but something about the way they approach this, them fighting together, something about it feels incredibly wrong to Atsumu. He has a bad feeling, and he can't shake it off. Osamu looks between them, tension radiating from his posture, but in the end, it's Oikawa who breaks the silence, this time with a dramatic sigh. Well, isn't this a fucking disaster waiting to happen? Kyumi glares at him, but Oikawa just shrugs, running a hand through his perfect hair, smiling. What? You two can yell all you want, but as you said, Kiyo-chan, you're not the only ones in this fight. You think we haven't considered the risks? He gestures toward Iwaizumi, who has been watching the whole scene with his arms crossed. We've got backup plans, strategies in place. Neither of you is doing this alone. And you? Oikawa flicks his gaze to Atsumu, eyes narrowing. Stop acting like you're the only one who cares about keeping him safe. Atsumu clenches his jaw but doesn't respond. The weight of Oikawa's words presses down on him, each syllable stinging like an accusation. He wants to lash out, to defend himself, to tell Oikawa that he's not acting like the only one who cares. He just can't shake the feeling that no one else could possibly care as much as he does. After all, he is the only one who truly understands, because no one else has seen Kyumi that raw, that vulnerable, the way he trembles when he talks about a Shijima, the weight of the struggle he carries silently. No one else knows that side of him, that deep, suffocating fear. Atsumu is the only one who has witnessed how fragile Kyumi really is beneath the surface, but that's nothing they need to know. He forces the words back down, refusing to let them escape. Silence feels safer than admitting just how terrified he is, not just for Kyumi, but for what will happen if he's the one to make a wrong move. We all know what's at stake here, Iwaizumi says calmly but firmly, finally stepping forward. But Oikawa's right. This mission isn't just about you two. We have a team, and we're going to make sure everyone comes out of this alive. Iwaizumi looks between Atsumu and Kyumi and clears his throat. but we need you both to keep it together. Kyumi and Atsumu lock eyes, the room shrinking around them as the tension shifts into something quieter, heavier. The air between them crackles with unspoken words, their gazes refusing to break. It's as if time itself has slowed, their focus narrowing to just each other. Neither one says a word, but the weight of their fear, their worry, hangs thickly in the silence. Kyumi's eyes are dark, intense, searching Atsumu's face for something unspoken. Permission, reassurance, or maybe just the acknowledgement that they are in this together. Atsumu feels it too. That shift, the anger that flared moments ago has ebbed, replaced by a deep, gnawing concern that sits like a stone in his chest. He knows Kyumi is waiting on him now. This isn't a decision Kyumi can make, at least not without Atsumu's consent. His throat tightens as he breathes in, and for a second, it feels like all the noise in the room has faded into the background. Ikuo tilts his head slightly, his brow arching as he watches them, clearly picking up on the silent exchange. Well, he urges, voice cutting through the stillness. Can you two do that? Atsumu doesn't answer right away, his eyes still locked with Kyumi's. His gaze is unwavering, but there's a flicker of something in it, something that says he's waiting, that this decision isn't his to make. It's Atsumu who has to give the answer. A deep breath shudders through Atsumu, but then, he finally nods. Yeah, he says quietly, his voice steadier than he feels. He breaks eye contact first, swallowing hard as the tension shifts again, this time settling over everyone in the room. We'll keep it together. The room exhales with him, but the knot in Atsumu's stomach only tightens. Atsumu stands beside Kyumi, staring out of the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ikuo's office, his back to the others. His gaze drifts over the sprawling city of Sendai below, watching the people down in the streets, tiny like ants, oblivious to how much everything is about to change. A shift in power is coming, and they don't even know it. Atsumu envies them, their ignorance, their simplicity, their distance from the storm brewing above their heads. They don't know how drastically things are about to change, how their world could be upended by the unseen battle for control. He hopes, deep in his chest, that everything will turn out well, that no one on their side will get hurt. But hope feels fragile. The room behind him is quiet, the tension still lingering despite the plans being laid out. He inhales deeply, pressing his forehead against the cool glass, letting it soothe the buzzing in his mind. The silence is heavy, almost suffocating, as he lets his eyes trace the streets below, his mind wandering through the what-ifs and the worst-case scenarios. Then, Osamu's voice cuts through the tension, pulling Atsumu back into the room. So, he says, arms crossed as he looks between the others, we stick to our plan? Kyumi nods, his voice steady and deliberate. Yeah, it's like we discussed back in Osaka. Atsumu's head turns slowly at that, gaze snapping to Kyumi, but Kyumi is already looking at him. He holds Atsumu's gaze for a moment longer before continuing, his tone even. I'll go after Tendo, he says. Atsumu will handle Wakatoshi. Wakatoshi. After all this time, it's still Wakatoshi. The room goes still. Atsumu doesn't say anything, but something inside him shifts. Their eyes lock, but Kyumi's face remains calm. There's a quiet intensity behind his sharp gaze, a determination that sends a shiver down Atsumu's spine. They don't need to speak. Atsumu knows why Kyumi has chosen to face Tendo. The memory of him nearly killing Atsumu burns in the back of his mind. Tendo is a walking nightmare, unpredictable and dangerous in ways most people can't imagine. Kyumi is doing this because of that, because Atsumu barely survived him once, let alone twice. He's trying to protect him. Kyumi's voice breaks the silence again, this time quieter, like he's explaining it for everyone else. Yet he is still looking at Atsumu. Tendo is too strong. He's erratic. No one can predict his movements. Not even me. There's a collective stillness in the room. Only Osamu and Suna remain calm, their expressions unreadable, but everyone else can feel the weight of those words. Tendo is dangerous. Dangerous enough that even Kyumi, as skilled, calculated and strong as he is, can't anticipate his next move. Atsumu's fists clench, tension building in his chest as he continues to hold Kyumi's gaze, locked in a wordless conversation. His heart pounds, but he keeps his face composed, even though he feels like he's on the verge of cracking. Kyumi's eyes soften, just for a fraction of a second, before his voice drops lower. Will you take care of the rest? And Atsumu doesn't even need him to elaborate. He knows exactly what Kyumi means. A Shijima. It's painfully clear now how hard this must be for him, asking someone else to handle something so personal. It's no wonder Kyumi doesn't say the words outright. Taking care of him could mean anything at this point, and Atsumu knows that. Kyumi doesn't explicitly ask for a Shijima's death. Whatever taking care means, it's his responsibility to make sure a Shijima can't be a threat to them, to Kyumi, ever again. Whether it's killing him or incapacitating him permanently, Atsumu has to be the one to make it happen. Yeah, he says without a second thought, his voice hoarse. Yeah, of course. He exhales slowly, meeting Kyumi's gaze with determination. His heart is still racing, but there's a steadiness in his eyes now, a quiet resolve that settles over him. He nods, firm and sure, as if solidifying the weight of the promise he just made. His fingers flex at his sides, hands itching with the need to act, but for now, he holds Kyumi's gaze, praying that they are not making a mistake. Kayumi's eyes soften again, just briefly, before he straightens. The moment of vulnerability gone in an instant. Ikuo pulls out a cigarette from his pocket, lighting it with a practiced flick. The small flame illuminates his face for a second before he takes a slow drag, exhaling a plume of smoke that curls lazily in the air. So, the Q-Micho starts. Voice casual but laced with underlying tension. We have some backup lined up. Hanamaki and Matsukawa are helping us from the inside. They make sure things are set up the way we need them. He pauses to take another drag, the smoke clouding his expression momentarily before he speaks again. We have more people on our side than you think. There's a lot of people who want Aoba Josei back where it belongs. Back in control. Iwaizumi crosses his arms, nodding. Maki and Matsun have been laying the groundwork for months. There are plenty of people in 𝒑𝒔 waiting for the right moment. They've been keeping quiet but trust me, they're ready. Ikuo exhales another stream of smoke, his eyes glinting with something sharp. 𝒑𝒔's always been mine, he says, voice dropping to a low murmur, and it's time to remind everyone of that. It's time to take it back. Osamu shifts where he sits, arms crossed, his brow furrowing slightly. So, what's the plan, then? You already know what Kayumi and I talked about, but what's your endgame here? Ikuo smiles, sharp and knowing. Simple. We strike fast and hard. The idea is to destabilize Ashijima's influence without giving him enough time to regroup. We're targeting key players. Tendo is one of them, but it's not just about taking him down. It's about making sure they can't recover. He flicks his cigarette ash into a nearby tray. Maki and Matsun will coordinate from the inside, while you handle the big targets. Tendo for Kayumi, Ashijima for Atsumu, Kageyama for Chibi-chan, and Hirugami for me. The rest of us will deal with the cleanup. Suna's eyes narrow slightly. And you think you have enough men to do all of that? His tone is casual, but there's a sharp edge of skepticism to his words. The Wiedenadlers are notoriously difficult to deal with, but Ikuo nods without hesitation. We'll gather everyone we need. The rest will join you too. He nods toward Osamu and Suna, in an Irizuki. Osamu's eyes flicker with thoughts, but he remains silent for now. Between Atsumu, Kayumi, Bakuto, and Hinata, we have more than enough strength to handle this, and there are plenty of capable people in 𝒑𝒔 on our side. We'll be good. Iwaizumi clarifies. Ikuo exhales another puff of smoke, a sharp grin tugging at his lips. Exactly. And Kiru's people will most likely split up. Some of them will handle the rest of the Wiedenadlers in Tokyo, while the others will head to Inarizuki as soon as we give them the signal. They are waiting for us. Kayumi's gaze flicks to Atsumu, then back to the group. His voice is even as he adds. Motoya and the EJP Raijin are also ready to strike whenever we need them. Osamu's eyes narrow slightly, his skepticism clear. And when exactly do you think all of this is going down? Atsumu's gaze snaps to his brother, something in his chest tightening at Osamu's tone. He hasn't said much this whole time, and the weight of that silence feels oppressive now. But what would it change if he spoke up? Atsumu clenches his fists, his heart racing. It doesn't matter what he says. In the end, they'll do whatever they want anyway. Kayumi furrows his brow, meeting Osamu's skeptical look head on. Daisho will make the first move once I'm back in Tokyo. It won't be long. Ikuo chimes in smoothly, a cold smile tugging at his lips. And that will be the moment I let Ashijima know that I'm not accepting his ridiculous offer. It'll be a clear sign we're ready to fight. When exactly is all this happening? Suna asks. His voice is calm, almost detached, but it draws everyone's attention. Atsumu stares at the floor, his heart thudding in his chest. He can't bring himself to look at Kayumi. He doesn't want to hear the answer, doesn't want to know when Kayumi will be leaving. Kayumi's voice is steady, but there's a heaviness to it as he finally speaks. 3 days. Atsumu swallows hard, his throat tight. I have to leave by the end of the week. 3 days. That's all the time they have left. Do you know anything more about Ashijima's plan? Suna's voice cuts through the tense air. Kayumi shakes his head, expression unreadable. Not much beyond what we've already discussed. His main objective is to have Tendo and me lead the mission if Ikuo rejects his offer. I'm guessing we'll split up when the time comes. Tendo will act on his own, and I'll be with Wakatoshi. Tendo is the only one he trusts completely. Suna furrows his brow, clearly puzzled. Why isn't it you? Kayumi stares at him, unflinching. His gaze is steady, and his words hit like a slap to the face. Why would you trust someone who works for you against their will? Suna's eyes widen slightly, caught off guard by the bluntness of Kayumi's response. The tension in the room thickens again, threatening to smother them all, until Ikuo flicks his lighter, pulling out another cigarette. Iwaizumi glares at him. Then we need to make sure you and Ashiwaka are separated when the time comes, the Q-Micho says smoothly, blowing out another trail of smoke. If it's going to be like that, we can't risk you two fighting each other. Iwaizumi crosses his arms. I'll keep an eye on Kayumi and Ashijima from a distance, but Atsumu should probably follow them. Wait for the right moment and face them as soon as they're alone. Atsumu's gaze snaps up at that, his eyes locking onto Kayumi's determined expression. Kayumi's silent stare only intensifies the weight in the room, as if he's willing Atsumu to understand the gravity of what's coming. The unspoken words between them feel louder than anything said, and Atsumu's chest tightens, the rawness of the situation threatening to swallow him whole. He knows what this means, knows what Kayumi is asking him to do, and despite everything in his gut screaming against it, he averts his gaze, turning back toward the windows. Sure. Atsumu mumbles, barely audible, his voice sounding distant and detached, like he's talking to himself more than anyone else. Osamu Atsumu's eyes narrow as he watches his brother with a skeptical, worried frown. Atsumu's silence is out of character, and the tension in his body, usually masked with sarcasm or his usual bravado, is impossible to miss. His reflection in the glass looks distant, almost fragile, as if he's lost in a sea of conflicting thoughts. He clenches his jaw, trying to steel himself against the wave of emotions rising in his chest. But the reality of what's coming, the danger, the inevitability of it all, presses down on him, makes the air in his lungs feel too heavy. Atsumu leans against the cold glass of the window, letting the chill seep into his skin, grounding him in the present. But his mind drifts, his eyelids flutter shut, and he's no longer in the meeting room surrounded by heavy conversation and war plans. Instead, he's at the beach, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face and the sand beneath his feet. He hears the crashing waves, feels the saltwater spray, and in front of him, there is Kyumi, smiling, carefree for once, laughing as Atsumu tackles him into the water. It's a dream, one he's had before, the dream he clung to when he was knocked out, hovering on the brink of death. A dream that felt too good to be real. Atsumu wonders if it will ever be anything more than that, if he'll ever really see Kyumi that way, free from all this weight, if they'll ever get their moment of peace, away from the shadows of their past, or if it will remain just a dream, something he can only hold on to when he closes his eyes and escapes reality. He opens his eyes, staring out at the city skyline, trying to shake the sinking feeling that none of it will come true. The lump in his throat is almost too much to swallow. Things aren't as predictable on Daisho's side, unfortunately. Kyumi's voice pulls him back and he blinks, remembering where he is. Osamu answers him, shaking his head. It's alright. Kita-san and the others are keeping an eye out. I'll let them know things go down by the end of the week. Kyumi nods. I'll let Motoya know too. We'll get the EJP guys moving toward Inarizaki. Oikawa, flicking his cigarette in the tray, adds, I'll contact Kiru. Let him know we're set. They all exchange nods, the pieces falling into place, the plan solidifying with each word. Kyumi glances at Osamu, then back to Oikawa. I should probably ask Motoya to join us here for the rest of the week. We could train together. Good idea. Osamu replies, and Suna nods in agreement beside him. Oikawa gestures toward the door. I have 3 apartments in this building that you can use. Motoya's old room is right next to the office, and there are 2 more apartments a few floors down. Take your pick. Thank you. Kyumi gives a small nod of gratitude. Osamu also nods, murmuring his thanks. Throughout this exchange, Atsumu doesn't dare look at any of them. His eyes are still fixed on the city outside, the skyline blurring as his gut churns. The bad feeling that's been growing inside him refuses to go away, only intensifying with each passing moment. The less time they have, the stronger it becomes, like a storm building inside him, pushing against the calm facade he tries so hard to maintain. He swallows again, but the lump in his throat stays lodged there, heavy and unmoving. He thinks about the beach, about the promise he's made to Kyumi's mother, and he keeps wondering if he'll be able to keep it. The office is eerily quiet now that everyone has left. Atsumu stays rooted by the window, eyes unfocused as he stares at the city below. The cool surface of the glass feels grounding against his temple, but it does little to calm the storm brewing inside him. His thoughts race, flickering between the violent reality they are about to face and the fleeting dream of peace. He doesn't hear Kyumi approach, but he feels his presence, steady and familiar, just behind him. There's a pause, a moment of hesitation, before Kyumi closes the distance. Atsumu tenses, but then relaxes almost imperceptibly as Kyumi's gloved hand smooths over his side. The touch is tentative at first, but when Atsumu doesn't pull away, Kyumi presses closer, his chest flush against Atsumu's back, his arms circle around Atsumu's waist, pulling him into a firm, reassuring embrace. Atsumu leans back slightly, just enough for their bodies to align, though he still can't bring himself to look at Kyumi. His gaze remains fixed outside, but his hands move almost instinctively, intertwining with Kyumi's as if anchoring himself to that one thing that feels real in this moment, his love. Kyumi leans in, his breath warm against Atsumu's ear as he murmurs, I don't underestimate you. The words send a shiver down Atsumu's spine, and he closes his eyes, exhaling softly. Kyumi's voice is low, soothing, yet firm, carrying the weight of his conviction. I know what you're capable of, Atsumu. I've seen it. You're stronger than anyone gives you credit for. Atsumu's fingers tighten around Kyumi's, but he doesn't respond right away. He knows Kyumi means it, knows that he doesn't doubt his skills as an assassin. That's not what's eating at him. I know, Atsumu finally says, voice quiet but strained. I know you don't doubt me. That ain't it. He swallows hard, his throat tight as his chest constricts. For a moment, the image of Kyumi on the beach flashes in his mind again, carefree and laughing, completely removed from the blood and violence that seem inevitable now. Atsumu inhales slowly, trying to steady himself. Kyumi's grip around his waist tightens just slightly, urging him to continue. There's a patience in his touch, in the way he holds Atsumu, as if he's willing to wait as long as it takes for Atsumu to find the words. It's not that I don't trust your abilities or mine. Atsumu mutters, his voice barely above a whisper now. It's just, this feels different. Feels like there's too much at stake, too much to lose. He can't lose Kyumi, not again. Atsumu's gaze flickers down to where their hands are joined before he turns just slightly to face Kyumi and glance up into his onyx eyes. And there it is again, that sliver of hunter green, consuming him like the ocean devours the shore. Kyumi takes a deep breath, his voice soft but firm as he replies. Chances would be worse if you went in there alone. Atsumu, I'm just trying to keep you safe. Atsumu shakes his head, the fight long drained out of him. I don't need your protection, Omi. I need you to understand how much this scares me. How much losing you scares me. His voice wavers on the last words, and Kayumi's grip tightens ever so slightly, grounding him, but also acknowledging the weight of Atsumu's fear. Atsumu swallows hard, hating the way the words come out broken. How raw and vulnerable he feels standing there with his heart in Kayumi's hands. Before he can think, before he can second guess himself, Atsumu turns in Kayumi's embrace, shifting to face him properly. The movement is slow, deliberate, and Kayumi doesn't pull back. He adjusts, tightening his arms around Atsumu's waist, holding him close, their chests pressed together, and Atsumu clings to Kayumi like a lifeline. The world outside, the fear, all of it fades for a moment as Atsumu breathes him in, takes in the familiar scent of Kayumi's cologne, the warmth radiating from his body. Every inch of Kayumi is solid, real, and here, Atsumu presses his forehead against Kayumi's shoulder, eyes fluttering closed as he lets the tension in his body finally melt away. When he opens his eyes just slightly, he raises a hand and feels Kayumi's heartbeat, steady and strong, pulsing beneath his fingertips, grounding him in a way nothing else can. In Kayumi's arms, he feels safe, secure, loved. He never wants to let go. He doesn't want to lose this. They stand there just like that, wrapped up in each other, the silence between them heavy but not suffocating. It's comforting, reassuring. Atsumu's breath syncs with Kayumi's, slow and even, and for the first time in what feels like forever, the knot of anxiety in his chest loosens just a little. It's not the mission itself that terrifies him. They had faced life and death situations before, countless times. This time, though, something is different. It's not just about their lives, it's about everything they could be. Everything Atsumu dared to dream of in stolen moments when he thought about the future. He tried to push the thought away, to keep things strictly professional, but it's impossible now. Kayumi wasn't just a partner, wasn't just another assassin to rely on. No, for Atsumu, he was everything, and Atsumu couldn't lose him. Not when he'd just started to imagine what it would be like to live in a world where they could have more than fleeting touches and glances stolen in the dark. Kayumi shifts slightly, his breath warm against Atsumu's neck as he speaks again, his voice quiet but laced with that familiar steel. You won't lose me, Kayumi says, his tone steady, grounding. I promise. There's a calm certainty in his voice, but it's not dismissive. He's not brushing off Atsumu's fears. He knows them, feels them too, but his presence, the solid warmth of his body pressed against Atsumu's, seems like an unspoken promise. But even that promise, even Kayumi's unshakable confidence, can't dissolve the fear that coils tight in Atsumu's chest. He wants to believe it, really. He wants to let Kayumi's words soothe the ache gnawing away at him, but Atsumu only shakes his head again, his eyes stinging with unshed tears. You can't promise that. His voice cracks as he says it, and Atsumu hates himself for it. He doesn't want to sound weak, doesn't want to cling to something that could be ripped away from him in an instant. But Kayumi's arms don't loosen. He's still there, holding Atsumu firmly, like he's afraid that if he lets go, Atsumu might fall apart. I'm scared too, you know, Kayumi admits quietly, his breath warm against Atsumu's ear, his lips brushing the sensitive skin there. I'm terrified of losing you. Atsumu's breath catches in his throat, but before he can respond, Kayumi continues, his voice steadying as he lays bare what he's been holding back. But you can't expect me to stay out of this. Not when everything in me is screaming to be there with you, right in the thick of it. You wouldn't listen to me if I asked you to stay behind, would you? Kayumi's tone is soft but pointed, knowing, you'd probably lose it if I even suggested it. Atsumu opens his mouth to protest, but the words die on his lips because he knows Kayumi is right. If their positions were reversed, if Kayumi were asking him to stay behind, Atsumu would never agree. He'd fight tooth and nail to be by Kayumi's side. The thought of him going into danger alone would be unbearable. See, Kayumi murmurs, his voice filled with quiet resolve. You can't expect me to do the same. I can't stand the thought of you going in there without me, of sitting here, waiting, not knowing if you're okay. Atsumu feels Kayumi's arms tighten around him, holding him as if he's afraid he might slip away. His voice is quiet but steady, the certainty in it grounding Atsumu in a way that nothing else could. But then, Kayumi pulls back and his hands tremble, just slightly, as they cradle Atsumu's face. There's a fierce determination in his eyes. I'm worried about you too, Atsumu, more than you know, but that's why we need to be in this together. I won't let anything happen to you. I'll make sure we both come out of this alive. I swear it. Kayumi pauses, resting his forehead against Atsumu's, their breaths mingling in the quiet space between them. The words hang between them, sinking deep into Atsumu's mind. He's scared, but so is Kayumi, and it's strange, somehow comforting, to hear him say it out loud. Atsumu grabs one of Kayumi's gloved hands and nuzzles further into his palm, letting his skin melt into his touch. He lets the silence wrap around them, lets the steady rhythm of Kayumi's breathing calm the rush of thoughts in his mind. Atsumu shifts, turning his head slightly to glance at him, and for a moment, he just stares into Kayumi's eyes. Those eyes that always seemed so cold to others but held an endless depth of emotion just for him. Don't get yourself killed, Atsumu whispers. It's not a demand or even a plea. It's a quiet request, fragile and sincere. Kayumi meets his gaze, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He leans in, his lips brushing lightly against Atsumu's temple. I won't. He promises again this time softer like. It's just for Atsumu to hear. Atsumu knows the promise is fragile. Knows that in their line of work, nothing is guaranteed. But as Kayumi leans down, gently capturing his lips in a soft, tender kiss, Atsumu lets himself believe it. Just for a little while, he tightens his grip on Kayumi's hands, as if by holding on, he can tether him to the world a little longer. Keep this moment between them suspended, with Kayumi's lips pressed gently against his. Everything else fades away. There's only this. Kayumi's warmth, his steady presence, and the fragile hope that somehow, against all odds, they'll make it through. And for now, that's enough. The air in the dojo is buzzing with energy, the sound of wooden weapons clacking together reverberating in the air. Motoya and Suna are locked in a fast-paced duel, their movements sharp, deliberate, and almost playful in their precision. Motoya, with his natural agility, weaves around Suna's strikes, but Suna, true to his assassin nature, waits patiently, eyes narrowing as he searches for an opening. Atsumu leans against Osamu, the weight of his body making his twin sway slightly, but Osamu doesn't budge much. His arms are crossed, eyes fixed on the fight. Yeah boy's pretty quick, Atsumu comments, tilting his head towards Suna with a sly grin. Osamu hums, maybe, but Motoya has his tricks too. Don't count him out yet, please, Samu. I ain't counting him out. Atsumu snickers, but Toya-kun's gonna trip up. Just wait. Osamu doesn't respond at first, still focused on the fight. He hums after a moment, the faintest hint of amusement tugging at the corner of his mouth. You think? Rin's not used to fighting people who don't immediately try to kill him. He's taking it easy. Taking it easy. Atsumu snorts. Look at him. He's practically toying with Motoya, waiting for him to slip up. Osamu rolls his eyes but says nothing, and Atsumu grins, knowing that his brother is thinking the same. Atsumu feels lighter than he has in days. The tension from yesterday is gone, replaced by this competitive spark that courses through him like adrenaline. He likes this feeling, being surrounded by his people, his team, even if it's all training for a battle that looms ever closer. Right now it's just fun. You should go up next, Samu. Show him how it's done. Atsumu teases, casting a sidelong glance at his brother. Though I guess it's a bit unfair, considering you don't even need a weapon. Osamu huffs, deadpan. I'd probably knock your cocky head right off. Tsumu, no weapon needed. He raises a brow, tilting his head to the side. But maybe I'll just watch you get trampled by Kayumi later. Sounds more entertaining. Atsumu scoffs, feigning offense. I'm gonna wipe the floor with Omi-kun's ass, and you know it. Osamu raises a brow at the phrasing, but before he can comment, Kayumi steps up behind them, clearly having overheard Atsumu's last statement. Wipe the floor with whose ass? Kayumi's voice is calm, but there's a teasing glint in his eyes as he looks down at Atsumu. Atsumu's grin widens. Yours, of course. Get ready, cause I'm gonna show you why they call me the best swordsman ever. He holds up his wooden katana, giving it a twirl before mockingly pointing it at Kayumi. He glances at the katana, then back at Atsumu with an unimpressed look. I wasn't aware we'd started ranking wooden sword fights. Before Atsumu can retort, the sound of Motoya hitting the ground interrupts them. The three of them glance back toward the fight just in time to see Suna standing over Komori, who's flat on his back with Suna's wooden blade pressed lightly to his throat. Atsumu snickers. Told you Suna-in would win. He shoots Osamu a smug grin. Wasn't even a fair fight. Osamu shrugs. He was playing with Motoya the whole time. Kayumi shakes his head, glancing at his cousin who is already getting up with a sheepish smile. Motoya needs to stop letting his guard down around Suna. He's too focused on speed, and Suna knows it. That's why you gotta mix things up a little. Keep 𝒑𝒒𝒒. Atsumu puffs out his chest, eager to join in on the teasing. You know, like me. Osamu stares at him, deadpan. Right. Keep 𝒑𝒒𝒒 by running your mouth so much they lose focus. That's a tactic, and it works. Atsumu protests, poking Osamu in the side. It's all part of the plan. Distract them with my charm. Then, bam, they're on the ground. Right. True charm there. Kayumi mutters dryly, but there's the slightest hint of amusement in his voice. He steps forward, arms crossed as he surveys the room. If you're so confident, Atsumu, why don't you take on 𝒑𝒑𝒂𝒄 next? At the mention of 𝒑𝒑𝒂𝒄, Atsumu falters, his bravado slipping for a moment. Bokken? He glances over to where the human owl is currently doing push-ups in the corner, radiating energy and enthusiasm like he's just warming up. Osamu smirks. What's the matter? Too scared of him beating you? Atsumu straightens immediately, puffing out his chest again. Scared? Me? 𝒑𝒓𝒊𝒕𝒔. Never. Kayumi chuckles softly, arms still crossed as he gives Atsumu a long look. Meanwhile, across the room, Motoya groans, rubbing the back of his neck as he gets up. Geez, I thought we were just sparring. Suna shrugs, lowering his wooden blade. I was, but you were too busy dodging to notice when I switched gears. Motoya shakes his head, though there's a smile on his face. I'll get you next time. You can try. Suna smirks lazily, twirling his blade in one hand before looking over at Osamu. You wanna go next, Mia? Osamu sighs, uncrossing his arms. Sure, why not? Let's see if you can take me down without that blade of yours. He steps forward, his calm demeanor completely unchanged. Atsumu laughs, feeling a rush of excitement again. Oh, this is gonna be good. Osamu steps forward, casually rolling his shoulders before standing opposite Suna. The air around them feels charged, like the calm before a storm, and Atsumu feels the excitement bubbling up again. Suna smirks, cracking his knuckles instead of wielding a blade. You ready for this? Osamu shrugs, his expression neutral, but there's a glint in his eyes. Bring it. Without another word, Suna lunges, his movements fast and precise, but Osamu is quick too, dodging and countering each attack with ease. There's no hesitation, no wasted energy. Both of them are sharp, focused, and it shows. Every move is met with a counter, each strike blocked or sidestepped with practiced ease. You see that? From the sidelines. Atsumu leans closer to Kyumi. Samu's a beast. Kyumi raises an eyebrow, not taking his eyes off the fight. Your brother will get his ass handed to him if he's not careful. Atsumu snorts, crossing his arms. Please, he got this. Sunarin's good, but Samu's the best close combat fighter we have. Looks like he's struggling. Kyumi points out as Suna presses in. His attack's more aggressive now. Osamu, for all his strength, seems just a hair slower in his reactions. That's just Samu getting into his rhythm, Atsumu says confidently, though he leans forward a little, eyes glued to the fight. Give it a sec. He's about to turn it up. Sure enough, Osamu ducks under a particularly fast swing, closing the distance between them in an instant. He uses his momentum to knock Suna back, and before Suna can recover, Osamu is on him, his hands moving so fast it's almost hard to follow. He traps Suna's wrist and then sweeps his leg out from under him, but Suna is just as quick, twisting in midair and landing with surprising grace. He grins lazily, even as he's on the back foot, and Osamu matches his grin with a smirk of his own, his breath a little heavier now. They don't need words to communicate. Instead, they look into each other's eyes and know immediately what the other one means. Suna's gaze flickers down to Osamu's lips for the briefest moment before he lunges again, this time closing the distance between them. It's no longer a clean exchange of strikes. It's a grapple now, more body against body, their movements becoming more intimate and tense. Every shove and pull brings them closer, neither willing to give the other an inch, each trying to gain the upper hand. Atsumu watches, his eyebrows raised. Yikes, they look like they're about to rip each other's clothes off. There's a smirk hidden beneath Kyumi's mask. Wouldn't surprise me. Atsumu laughs. Betcha 5,000 yen Samu wins. Kyumi tilts his head, considering. I'll take that bet. And just as they say it, Osamu manages to pin Suna to the ground, one hand pressing Suna's chest down, their faces inches apart. Both of them are breathing hard, and for a moment, neither moves. Suna's eyes are wide open, the air around them feels heavy, charged, and for a split second, it looks like Osamu might lean in even closer, but instead, he stands up, offering Suna a hand with a smirk. Close, but not close enough. Suna takes his hand, grinning mischievously. Enjoy the win while it lasts. Next time, I won't go easy on you. Atsumu cackles from the sidelines, slapping Kyumi on the back. Told ya. Now cough up. Kyumi rolls his eyes, digging into his pocket for some cash. Remind me never to bet with you again. Atsumu's grin is immediate and smug. Oh, come on. You wanna tell me you regret any of our bets? I mean, the first one was pretty memorable, and I can't help but think my lap dance might have been a highlight too. He raises an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the moment. You're insufferable, Kyumi mutters under his breath, his cheek flushing slightly. Before Atsumu can fire back with more teasing, Osamu saunters over, arms crossed, the smirk still tugging at his lips, still talking about all that junk instead of focusing on the training. Atsumu, no wonder yeah Rusty. Atsumu's eyes widen as he turns to face his brother. Rusty, me? Who do you think you're talking to? The same guy who got knocked on his ass last time we sparred. Atsumu bristles, ready to snap back, but Osamu's smirk widens as he takes a step closer. Wanna prove me wrong? Right here, right now. For a split second, Atsumu looks like he's ready to take him up on the challenge, but before either of them can make a move, Suna steps in, raising a hand between them. No, absolutely not. There's not gonna be any mere twins fight. He looks between them with an amused, knowing glance. I've known you too long enough to know no one's walking out of here alive if you start sparring. Atsumu grins, about to fire back with something sharp, but before he can, Kyumi cuts in, his voice cool and calm. Actually, I'm curious to see what Osamu's skills are, and well, Atsumu stiffens at that, his playful grin faltering ever so slightly. The tension in the room shifts, becoming something heavier, more serious. Osamu's eyebrow arches as he turns his full attention to Kyumi, eyes narrowing in interest. Oh yeah, and why's that? Kyumi shrugs, but there's a gleam of his own interest in his eyes. You've been quiet this whole time. All that talk about how you've always been one of the best in Inarizaki. I want to know if you can back up the reputation. You wanna see what I'm capable of? Huh? Osamu's voice drops a notch, and there's a flicker of challenge in his tone now, more deliberate than before. Kyumi's gaze meets his without hesitation, sharpened and wavering. The air between them feels charged, the quiet competitiveness hanging in the balance. Yeah, Kyumi says smoothly, crossing his arms with the same collected coolness that never wavers. Osamu's eyes narrow just a fraction more, the corner of his mouth twitching up into a small, almost imperceptible smirk. Atsumu, standing off to the side, watches them closely, feeling the sudden tension rolling between his brother and his, well, ex-rival, significant other, love interest. He's not even sure what to call Kyumi, because calling him his friend definitely feels wrong and calling him his boyfriend even more so, bordering on a lie. His throat tightens, the playful energy from before slipping away. You better be careful what you wish for. Osamu drawls, his voice low and steady. I don't pull punches. Kyumi doesn't so much as flinch. His gaze still cool and calm. I'd be disappointed if you did. Atsumu lets out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, his eyes flicking between the two of them. Oi, oi. He interjects, his tone only half joking now. We're supposed to be trainin', not settlin' grudges. Osamu's smirk widens just a little, and he finally pulls his eyes away from Kyumi to glance at his brother. Who said anything about a grudge? I'm just showing your boyfriend what a real fighter looks like. Atsumu's face turns beet red, and he feels that strong urge to punch his twin for that, before things can get too serious. Though, Motoya chuckles from the side, sheepishly rubbing the back of his neck. Well, now that Kyumi's stepping in, we might as well pack it up. I doubt any of us are coming out winners if it gets to that. Atsumu shoots a glare at Motoya, clearly not ready to let that slide. Oh. Come on. You're acting like I'm not still the best in here. You're only the best at running that big mouth of yours. Osamu counters. Better than being the quiet one who loses. Atsumu shoots back. Suna sighs, already rubbing his temples like he's done this 100 times before. Just fight already. Yeah, he is definitely done with them. Kyumi steps forward with a small smirk, his tone deadpan but with an amused edge. If we're ranking skills by how much you two argue, Atsumu has already won. Osamu snorts, giving Kyumi a sidelong glance. I don't argue. I make statements. Atsumu's the one who can't handle the truth. Hey, shush. Osamu cuts him off with a wave of his hand, his eyes never leaving Kyumi. Shut your trap and watch me knock Kyumi to the ground. You're confident, Osamu. Kyumi smirks, his tone calm, but there's a sharpness in his gaze now that wasn't there before. Course I am. Osamu replies smoothly. His posture is relaxed, but the intensity in his eyes speaks volumes. You think I'm gonna let some Yakuza guy beat me? You forget. Kyumi replies coolly, stepping forward. He narrows his eyes, though his amusement is clear. I'm more of an assassin than some Yakuza guy. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Omi-kun. Osamu's smirk widens, and Atsumu visibly cringes at the use of the nickname. Come on, bring it. And just like that, the room quiets, the air thick with anticipation as they circle each other. Kyumi's stance is controlled, his movements measured, while Osamu keeps his center low, muscles loose and ready to react. The tension crackles between them, and Atsumu can barely breathe, his heart thudding in his chest as he watches two of the most important people in his life square off. Atsumu swallows hard, his throat is dry. How the hell did he end up in here? For a moment, no one moves. The air feels so thick, it's almost suffocating as Atsumu watches with wide eyes, his heart hammering in his chest. His hands ball into fists at his sides, nails digging into his palms as he fights the urge to step in, even though he knows better than to interrupt. Atsumu's body is tense because this is Osamu and Kyumi fighting, and he doesn't know if this is something he even wants to see. It's not that he doesn't trust either of them, but the thought makes his stomach churn and his nerves jumble. He can practically hear his own heartbeat as the tension mounts, like a coil wound too tight, ready to snap. His breath catches in his throat. They are both sizing each other up, waiting for the right moment. Then, in a blink, Osamu darts forward. His speed is impressive. He tries to catch Kyumi off guard with a quick jab, but Kyumi sidesteps. His reflex is impossibly fast. They exchange a rapid series of blows, each one blocked or evaded, their movements fluid and precise. Atsumu can't tear his eyes away, nerves frying as he watches them both go at it. Every move is a sharp clash of skill, strength, and strategy, and neither of them is giving an inch. They are both good. He can't even tell who's better. They are both holding back. Suna mutters, his eyes tracking the movements like a hawk, his lazy smirk still in place but more focused now. He leans back against the wall, arms crossed as he watches them spar. Motoya, sitting beside him, nods thoughtfully. Looks like Osamu wants to bait Kyo. Suna hums in agreement, but there's a glint in his eyes. He's waiting for SakuAtsu to make a mistake. Then he'll wait forever. Samu will get him eventually. Suna smirks. He's real sneaky when he wants to be. He waits for you to get cocky and then knocks you off balance. Atsumu's gaze flickers between them, but he can't bring himself to speak, too engrossed in the rapid back and forth. Kyumi and Osamu are well matched, neither one giving in. Kyumi's defense is impeccable, his movement smooth as water, while Osamu is relentless, closing the distance again and again, each time getting just a little closer to landing a hit. Suna narrows his eyes, watching the way Osamu adapts to Kyumi's speed. SakuAtsu has stamina, he says dryly to Komori, but Samu has patience. Komori chuckles softly. Kyo has plenty of that too. It's almost scary. He'll let someone tire themselves out before he even breaks a sweat. Suna glances at Atsumu, who's still wound tight, his eyes glued to the fight. I can imagine. He mumbles, a smirk tugging at his lips. I mean, he's kept up with Tsumu all this time. Atsumu clicks his tongue in annoyance, his scowl deepening as he flicks his middle finger in Suna's direction without even looking at him. Komori stifles a laugh. Touchy, aren't we? Suna chuckles, casting a sideways glance at Komori. What can I say? It's part of his charm. He leans back a little, still watching the fight, his smirk widening. But, you know, Atsumu's not the only one who can get under someone's skin. Yeah, I bet. Komori says almost absent-mindedly, too focused on the fight. SakuAtsu will slip eventually, Suna says, his gaze sharpening as he watches Osamu move. Osamu's good at reading people. He just needs to find the opening. And I think that's the problem. Komori answers confidently, his expression changing to something almost apologetic. Osamu goes for a sweeping leg strike, aiming to knock Kyumi off balance, but Kyumi leaps back, his movement so smooth it's almost frustrating to watch. Sweat beads on their foreheads, but neither looks tired, just focused. Then Kyumi comes at him again, a low punch aimed at Osamu's torso. Osamu blocks, but the force drives him back a step, his feet sliding across the floor. Atsumu clenches his jaw. I'm impressed. Osamu really is relentless. Motoya tilts his head slightly, intrigued, but Kyumi has the advantage in speed. He may prefer distance, but once someone forces him up close, he switches gears fast. He's been trained to handle anyone in close quarters. Suna's mouth twitches, impressed despite himself. He's annoyingly good at it, too. The fight takes a sharp turn, though, as Osamu switches gears. He ducks under one of Kyumi's punches and closes the distance in an instant, locking Kyumi's arm in a tight grip. For a moment, it looks like Osamu might have the upper hand, but Kyumi twists out of it with surprising grace, slipping from Osamu's grasp like a shadow in the dark. The two fighters pause for a beat, circling each other again, both breathing heavily but still focused. The room feels electrified, each move calculated, each strike dodged by a hair's breadth. Atsumu can feel his pulse thundering in his ears, his jaw clenched so hard it's starting to ache. Just then, Osamu launches forward with another burst of speed, catching Kyumi off guard. His fist grazes Kyumi's side, and for a split second, it looks like Osamu might have him, but Kyumi recovers, pivoting smoothly out of Osamu's reach, his breath coming faster now. Atsumu finally exhales, but his body remains tense. Every muscle in his body feels cold, like he's fighting the urge to jump in himself. There's a grudging respect growing between Osamu and Kyumi. By now, both are fully aware that the other isn't holding back and neither is willing to be the first to lose ground. But then this happens. Kyumi feints to the left, baiting Osamu into reacting. Osamu shifts his weight to counter, but it's exactly what Kyumi was waiting for. In a split second, Kyumi sweeps low with a lightning-fast kick, knocking Osamu's legs out from under him. Before Osamu can even process the move, Kyumi's right there, pinning him to the ground with an arm locked firmly around his throat, just tight enough to make Osamu know it's over. Atsumu winces, watching as his brother struggles for a brief moment before finally tapping out with a frustrated grunt. Kyumi releases him immediately, standing up with the slightest smirk, offering Osamu a hand. You almost had me, he says, his tone even but with an edge of amusement. Osamu glares up at him, breathing hard, but takes the offered hand anyway. Almost ain't good enough. Huh? Kyumi shrugs, still smirking. Not when you're fighting me. You might wanna take notes. Tsumu. Suna drawls, leaning back just enough to appear relaxed. Might come in handy the next time you feel like picking a fight with either of them. Atsumu scowls and crosses his arms with a huff. You know who you're talking to, right? I don't need notes. I could take either of them with one hand tied behind my back. Yeah. Suna raises an eyebrow. Big talk from someone who's been saved from each of them multiple times. He smirks, eyes glinting. Guess it's easier to run your mouth when you're not the one getting knocked around. Atsumu opens his mouth to snap something back but then feels the weight of Kyumi's gaze on him. He turns to find dark eyes studying him. Cool and calculating, even with the mask on. Atsumu can sense the amusement behind it, the slight shift in Kyumi's posture giving him away. Is that so? Kyumi asks, his tone deceptively calm. Care to prove it? Atsumu blinks, caught off guard for a second, then grins, his usual cocky bravado returning. What? You wanna fight me now? He laughs, loud and obnoxious. I'm warning ya, Omi, it ain't gonna be like Samu. You're dealin' with the better twin this time. Kyumi tilts his head, expression unreadable but his eye sharp. Oh, then why don't you show me? Atsumu's grin falters for a moment, realizing that Kyumi is completely serious. But Atsumu, never one to back down from a challenge, scoffs and rolls his shoulders. There's a spark in his eyes now, one of determination. He and Kyumi had faced off a couple of times before, and Atsumu could admit, grudgingly, that Kyumi had gotten the better of him more often than not. But this time, Atsumu feels the difference in himself. His mind is clear, unburdened by the usual distractions or worries that often weighed him down. Osamu's here, Kyumi's here, there's no one else to worry about, and with that freedom comes a renewed confidence. He's ready to show Kyumi exactly what he's capable of when he's at his best. Alright then, let's do it my way. He turns and grabs another wooden katana from the rack, tossing it over to Kyumi with a smug grin. We'll make this interesting. Kyumi catches the wooden blade effortlessly, testing the weight of it in his hand, onyx eyes still locked on molten gold. Atsumu brandishes his own katana with a flourish, spinning it in his hand before settling into a stance. Let's see if you can keep up. There's a brief, charged silence as the two of them face off, and everyone else takes a step back, knowing full well that Atsumu's ego combined with Kyumi's precision is a recipe for disaster, or a very entertaining fight. Suna clicks his tongue. This will be fun. Komori sighs, folding his arms. I give it 3 minutes before Atsumu regrets this. Suna smirks. You're being generous. Hey, I'm just trying to keep things fair. Komori rubs the back of his neck sheepishly. Suna chuckles lowly, his eyes glinting. Well, I wouldn't bet against Sakusa. Atsumu ignores them, his focus snapping back to Kyumi as he narrows his eyes. Kyumi's stance immediately shifts into a poised, predatory one, and Atsumu's grin widens at that, a flash of excitement coursing through him. Alright, Omi-kun, Atsumu says, his voice laced with confidence. Then, his tone drops a notch as he mutters, "Let's see who's learning something today." He lunges forward with speed and precision and an overconfident smirk, his katana slicing through the air. 𝒂𝒉𝒕🔂 blocks it easily, their wooden swords clashing with a sharp crack. His eyes narrow slightly in focus, but there's the barest hint of his own smirk in the crinkle near his eyes, the kind that makes Atsumu's pulse skip just a little. Atsumu's grin widens as he circles 𝒂𝒉𝒕 like predator, testing his defenses. "You're too slow, Omi-kun," he taunts, spinning his katana in his hand like he's showing off, his tone dripping with mischief. "You gotta keep up if you wanna stand a chance." 𝒂𝒉𝒕's stance remains calm, unreadable. "You talk big for someone who barely grazed me." Atsumu laughs, his tone obnoxiously smug as he sidesteps a precise swipe from 𝒂𝒉𝒕 and swings his own blade in a sharp arc, aiming for 𝒂𝒉𝒕's side. 𝒂𝒉𝒕 blocks it with ease, their wooden swords meeting with a solid thwack, neither of them backing down. "Grazed ya? I'm just warming up, Angel." Atsumu shoots back with a wink. 𝒂𝒉𝒕's eyes flicker with amusement. "Focus more on your footwork, Mia," he quips swiftly, countering with a low strike aimed at Atsumu's legs. Atsumu barely dodges, twisting just in time to avoid being knocked off his feet. "But it's not fair, you know, you're distracting me with those pretty eyes, Omi," he says with a playful grin, though his concentration doesn't falter for a second. 𝒂𝒉𝒕 advances, pushing him back with a quick series of strikes. "If you can't handle the pressure, just say so." "Oh, I can handle it just fine, darling." Atsumu grins wider, spinning away from 𝒂𝒉𝒕's next strike and launching a fast, sweeping attack at 𝒂𝒉𝒕's side. 𝒂𝒉𝒕 twists, evading the blow with a smooth pivot that barely seems to cost him any effort. The crinkles around his eyes deepen as he gives Atsumu a look that reads, "Is that all?" Atsumu clicks his tongue, adjusting his grip and darting in again, lightning fast. Their blades clash mid-air, locked for a moment as both men press forward, neither willing to give an inch. Atsumu leans in closer, feeling the heat between them, his grin now bordering on cocky. "Careful, Mia, getting overconfident never ends well for you." 𝒂𝒉𝒕 murmurs, the words slipping between them like a challenge, his voice just low enough to make Atsumu's stomach flip in a way he refuses to acknowledge. But his grin doesn't falter. "You're just mad 'cause I'm winning," he says, his tone dripping with mischief, though there's something more in the way he holds 𝒂𝒉𝒕's gaze, something that simmers beneath the surface. "You're delusional." 𝒂𝒉𝒕 deadpans, disengaging with a sharp step backward before swinging his katana up in a clean arc. Atsumu blocks the strike, but he feels the force behind it and stumbles a little. 𝒂𝒉𝒕's movements are annoyingly smooth, every strike just a hair away from knocking Atsumu off balance. Still, Atsumu is not backing down. He switches tactics, dropping low and sweeping his katana toward 𝒂𝒉𝒕's legs, trying to catch him off guard. 𝒂𝒉𝒕 leaps over the strike effortlessly, and for a split second, Atsumu's grin falters. "It takes a little more than that, Atsumu," 𝒂𝒉𝒕 says, his tone infuriatingly calm, and there's something almost seductive in the ease with which he maneuvers, in the way his voice wraps around Atsumu's name. "MHMMM. All talk no bite." Atsumu quips, a grin tugging at his lips as he recovers and tightens his stance. He swings with more force now, his eyes sharp with focus, determined to break through 𝒂𝒉𝒕's defense. But 𝒂𝒉𝒕 still blocks it effortlessly, though Atsumu can see the subtle shift in his posture, like he's finally starting to take things a little more seriously. "Maybe I'm just saving my bite for when it counts." 𝒂𝒉𝒕 quips back, his eyes crinkling with amusement above his mask. Atsumu's heart skips just a little faster. 𝒂𝒉𝒕 parries Atsumu's next strike with ease, his movements fluid and controlled, not a single ounce of excess energy wasted. Atsumu clicks his tongue, clearly not discouraged, if anything, more fired up by 𝒂𝒉𝒕's calm. "Oh, you're better. Wouldn't wanna embarrass you in front of your cousin and all," he drawls, his tone dripping with mock confidence. 𝒂𝒉𝒕's stance stays casual, though his eyes never leave Atsumu's. Bold words, coming from someone who's yet to land a hit. Atsumu's grin widens, feeling the thrill of their teasing more than any real sense of competition. Neither of them is fighting at full capacity, but they know how to push each other just enough to make things interesting. They continue trading blows, each strike met with equal precision. Atsumu's body moves with practiced grace, the wooden katana an extension of himself, but 𝒂𝒉𝒕 seems to be able to keep up with him. Every time Atsumu gets close, 𝒂𝒉𝒕 either parries with ease or sidesteps entirely, his expression frustratingly composed. Atsumu's pulse quickens, not from nerves but from the way 𝒂𝒉𝒕's dark eyes seem to follow his every move, like they're tracing the contours of his body with more interest than the wooden katana in his hand. The smirk on Atsumu's face falters just slightly as he notices how 𝒂𝒉𝒕's gaze lingers for a heartbeat too long, especially when their movements bring them closer. Atsumu darts forward again, but this time he's slower, just enough to see if 𝒂𝒉𝒕's focus wavers. When 𝒂𝒉𝒕 blocks his strike, their katanas lock together, pressing against each other. Atsumu's breath hitches as their faces hover inches apart, his eyes flicking down, almost instinctively, to the mask that hides 𝒂𝒉𝒕's lips. 𝒂𝒉𝒕 doesn't move back immediately, their swords still clashing, but there's something in his gaze now, something softer, more heated, though his expression stays composed. Atsumu's heartbeat stutters, and for the briefest moment, he wonders if 𝒂𝒉𝒕 can feel the way his pulse races in this close proximity. "You're trying to distract me, darling?" Atsumu teases, though his voice comes out lower than he intended. 𝒂𝒉𝒕's lips twitch upward. "You seem distracted enough on your own, Atsumu." He presses harder into the sword lock, forcing Atsumu back a step, but his eyes linger on Atsumu's flushed face. Atsumu swallows thickly, his hand gripping the katana a little tighter as they circle each other again. This time, when their wooden blades clash, the impact reverberates through his entire body, but it's the way Kayumi's hand briefly grazes his wrist that sends a shiver up Atsumu's spine. He's definitely not blushing from exhaustion anymore. Yeah, really taking time today. Ha. Omi-kun, Atsumu mutters, licking his lips unconsciously. His eyes flicker back to where Kayumi's mouth is hidden, feeling a strange, simmering tension that makes his body buzz with energy, the kind he's definitely not used to feeling during a sparring match. Kayumi notices. Of course, he does. His own gaze briefly dips, catching the subtle motion of Atsumu's tongue. His grip on the katana tightens for a fraction of a second, before he swiftly parries Atsumu's next attack, knocking him off balance but not enough to overpower him yet. From the side, Osamu, Suna, and Komori sit watching, half engaged in their own conversation. Komori looks slightly confused, but Suna and Osamu exchange knowing looks. Then, Osamu leans back on his hands, tilting his head. You see that, Rin? He asks, his voice loud enough to carry over to Atsumu and Kayumi. Suna smirks. Sure thing, I do. They are practically flirting. Kayumi's lips twitch into the smallest smile, and Atsumu's face flushes even harder. They should just kiss already. Suna drawls lazily, eyes gleaming with amusement. Osamu snickers, crossing his arms over his chest. His grin turns devious, and he calls out louder. Oh, Atsumu, how's sleeping with Omi-kun? He as good with his hands as he is with a sword? Atsumu stumbles mid-swing, his face practically igniting in bright red as he sputters, completely thrown off. Wow, Osamu. Kayumi's lips twitch, clearly amused by the interaction, but his focus remains razor sharp. Atsumu's stumble costs him. In an instant, Kayumi surges forward, exploiting the opening Osamu's comment created. He presses Atsumu back with a series of swift, calculated strikes, forcing him on the defensive, and Atsumu barely keeps up, his face still flushed and distracted by his brother's teasing. Kayumi's final strike comes in with precise speed, disarming Atsumu with a single, fluid motion. Atsumu's katana clatters to the ground, and before he knows it, Kayumi's sword is at his chest, knocking him onto his back. Spicy stuff starts here. Please hit the AO3 link if you want to read the rest of this chapter.